Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and it's the final week of International Women's Month. And if you haven't noticed, I've been featuring badass women every week in March. While seeing the title International Women's Month on the calendar was the inspiration for doing 4 women in a row, I, and we as a society and as an industry, need to get better when it comes to gender equality and equality in general. While my podcast has had more women than most, I need to keep getting better, and that's one of my goals moving forward with everything that I do in life, to get better and to be more considerate of others. But I'm not going to sit here and talk about what I can do better. I'm just going to do it. And this week, my guest is another late bloomer, someone who had to fight for everything that she's received in skiing. While Elyse Saugstad is a household name in the ski industry these days, her role in the industry was not defined until she started fighting for change. Elyse spent the early part of her pro career being the squeaky wheel, fighting for what was right when it came to women in skiing. This isn't just a story about an incredible athlete making it. It's a look into the life and times of a person who risked it all to become a lightning rod for change. Elyse Saugstad has had a huge impact on the sport of skiing and where women belong in it, and that's right next to the men. Before we get into the podcast, I want to thank you for listening and ask you to share my social posts and tell a friend about the show. It really does help the podcast grow. Finally, this thing doesn't happen without sponsors, and I only work with the best brands in the business. They are Best Day Brewing, Stanley, Outdoor Research, Elan Skis, and Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Now, let's talk with Elyse Saugstad. You went to the Super Bowl, and that is so cool to me. First, how much were tickets to the big game?
Tickets are very, very, very expensive. I think the seats we had would have cost anywhere between 8 to 10 grand a pop probably, but we got hooked up with the tickets, so that's why we went.
That is pretty awesome. And were there any good celebrity sightings at the game?
Not where we were sitting. I think the celebrities are all in the box seats and they're kind of out of touch for the normal person. So I did not see any except for, what was on the halftime show, what you could see from afar. But I will say this, later that evening, when we were walking around the casino trying to get some food and were really depressed, we saw Superman. Henry Caviezel? I don't know how to say his last name. You know who I'm talking about?
I know vaguely who you're talking about, but you're into that stuff, right? Like People and US Weekly are kind of guilty pleasures of yours?
They can be. I fully admit that I will look at one of those things and look at Us Weeklies. It's not so much about like keeping up on the celebrities. I just love seeing they have one of the pages with all the fancy dresses and things. I've always really been into that for whatever reason. So when I am on a flight, you'll see I'll have like an Us Weekly, I'll have a New Yorker, and I'll have some podcasts and some great Netflix lined up.
All right. Well, you were also famous for what sounds like a gross drink back in the day. Did you guys have any duck farts at the Super Bowl on Sunday? And what are those things all about?
The duck farts. Oh my gosh, I haven't even thought about one of those in probably like a decade. No duck farts at the Super Bowl. God, duck farts there. Let's see here. It's like whiskey and Kahlua. And I feel like there's one other, like maybe Bailey's, or Bailey's is Kahlua. Oh, I can't remember. It's a really creamy liquor drink that is actually nice to sip on and not necessarily take shots of, but yep.
I heard you were the one that used to order them back in the day, and that's how we're going to talk about the Super Bowl. We're going to talk a little bit about your recent project right here, Here, Hold My Kid. It may be the funniest ski movie in years, but it also touches on some real topics when it comes to being a woman in skiing. And I was kind of expecting a movie that talked about maybe losing sponsor support because you had a kid, but that really wasn't the story I heard. It was more the story of the journey of being a token female and ultimately the reality that a male snowboarder is the most marketable of all things in snow. Would that be fair to say?
That was one way we played it out for sure. Including the male snowboarder happened to just be that we wanted to throw a very popular male character in the mix. It didn't necessarily have to be a snowboarder per se. But yes, I think that movie was just kind of digging deep into some of those things that happen and have happened through mine and Jackie's careers, but to do it in a really fun way and poking fun at it and just taking everyone along for the ride and having kind of an underlying message too. Not a bad thing.
Well, the film is great. The premise is that you're a pro parent and you're competing with another pro parent for the lone female athlete spot with a brand that has 11 men on it. And who came up with the power powder idea? And have you ever been in that situation, like knowing you're competing with another woman for one spot?
So that idea came from we're trying to think at the get-go of how we were going to move this plot line along and how we wanted to create something where Jackie and I would become competitive with one another that would just build as the movie went. I think the original idea of trying to come up with an energy drink for parents was born between Cody and I. But on the same token, we threw it out to the group. Jackie came on board right at the get-go. I had this idea of I had just had my kid with Indy, and Jackie was still pregnant, but soon to be having Tor. And I approached her. I was like, hey, I got this idea for a movie next year. What do you think? And she was totally in. So the next step was for us to figure out, okay, well, who are we going to bring in to do this movie, to make this movie? Because that actually was really important. We knew that if we wanted to do a movie where it had a bit of plot, comedy, etc., a lot of dialogue, you actually need to bring in people where you're going to write a script and have everything pretty well thought out to some degree. You can't just be like, well, we're going to make a comedy, so that means let's just go out, film skiing, and then we'll be funny and we'll just capture funny stuff. Like, it doesn't work that way. I mean, it can work that way, but you won't get very far. You won't have much to show at the end.
Sure.
So we ended up, and a long story short, without getting into it, but we brought in these two Brits, Adam Gindel and John O'Verity, who are just so incredibly hilarious and got that really witty, dry sense of British humor. And by bringing those guys in, we started throwing all these ideas around and concepts and whatnot of how we were going to make it happen. And I don't remember who came up with the power powder exactly, but the idea was like, we needed a parent energy drink, which made a lot of sense because when you're a parent, and as you know, I mean, you're much further down the road and actually get plenty of sleep now for many years. But at the get-go, you don't get much sleep. And so the idea of marketing towards parents an energy drink seems pretty obvious, like a no-brainer. It's almost kind of surprising that there hasn't been more geared towards parents.
So we might see one of those at some point. But in the world of your sponsorship over your career, has anyone ever told you, openly said, hey, you're in a competition for this spot with another woman and it's going to take this season to see who we pick?
Oh, definitely not open about it. I think that there are situations where they really only want one woman. I mean, I actually dealt with it with a ski production company, one of the well-known ski production companies. So as it goes to get in the movies, most of the movies are funded by all the ski industry brands. And these brands have actually a lot of say of who is going to be in the movie. So my brand back in the day, who was a pretty high up brand, and said to the ski movie company, hey, we want you to film Elyse now. And they literally said, we already have our female. We're good. And my brand, unfortunately, didn't really push back too much because I think that's just kind of the way it was. And it was just like, okay, well, we're not going to ruffle feathers. And it wasn't that my brand was asking for the film company to replace said female that was already a part of the program, just to add me in. And they were like, no, we're good.
And that's crazy because we'll talk about that a little bit later. We probably won't talk about it in detail because we just discussed it a bit. But I mean, this is like when you're about to like not peak in your career, but everybody knows who you are. I think you had just won a Powder Award and it was like time for you to start really filming with the big dogs. You had left the Freeride World Tour and it was like everything was lining up for you to be the next film star until the movie was like, nah, we don't want her.
Yeah. And actually, I hadn't won a Best Female segment yet. That came after. That kind of came after, like, I had won the Freeride World Tour overall and was trying to start making my way into the world of movie production. And yeah, it made sense. One of the main reasons why I competed in the first place was to make a name for myself. You know, it's kind of like put your name on the map for people to be like, oh, okay, that's who that person is. And after that is when that happened. So when I ended up winning the best female performance for my collab project, that was because I was getting told no left and right, and you're like, okay, well, I guess I got to figure out my own way to do this.
Yep. I will say before we get too far ahead of the game that everyone can see your movie for free on Red Bull TV, and I highly recommend it. It is laugh out loud funny. And my last question around the movie is, you have a line in there that's kind of like, people like to see social media content from people whose lives are better than theirs. And while that's a joke, is there some truth to that? Like, do you get more response when you show rad stuff than when you show like stuff with you and your kid?
Well, the funny thing was that was like a full ad lib moment. But the problem is that there's truth to that. It's not pointed so much at me, but like our culture, and I think around the world, people are obsessed with celebrities. Like, look at how many followers someone like Kim Kardashian has. What does she do? What does she actually add to our society? Like, I can't think of anything that makes her really that amazing besides she's really beautiful and she spends a lot of time trying to be super fabulous. And people love watching that stuff. And so there's a joke to be made out of that, right?
Yeah, there is.
And so that's kind of why we went there with that. And yeah, the whole play on the social media, it's just such a major aspect in our sport these days and for professionals, and that balance between trying to be a professional athlete, but then also the world of influencers and how our ski brands want us to be influencers to some degree. And the expectations of social media has risen quite a lot. So that was all, trying to make fun of that too, because there's a lot of stuff that can be really funny within social media and expectations, and kind of like showing a mirror on our own culture. People go crazy over the part, what Jackie's take on is in the movie with her social media, and where she goes is very reflective of the way things go viral and what we like to see, or what people think is just fabulous. And I don't know. I'm kind of talking in circles now at this moment. And I will fully blame this on the Super Bowl hangover. We were in Vegas, and also I'm just still so depressed. So yeah, it's kind of clouding my my brain at the moment. But anyway, going back to the Here to Hold My Kid, I think we just really tried to poke fun at a lot of stuff. How can you not, and we had a good time at it. And one other thing I will note too is that you can watch it on Red Bull TV, but you can also see the movie for free online at Outside Watch. So you got both places to check that movie out.
Okay. I didn't know Outside Watch was free. I thought I had to sign up for that for some reason. But you got two places to watch it, and it's definitely worth checking out. And in what you just said about the social media part, it's like when you came up, you had to go through these contests, like you said, to kind of prove yourself and let everybody know who you were. And then eventually you can graduate into filmmaking. But with the social media element these days, it's like there's a whole new way for people to kind of make a name for themselves, and they don't have to put their life on the line as much as maybe you did in contests when it's bulletproof and you're flying halfway across the world for shit conditions, because, a social media clip or two can help build a following that can get the right team manager looking at you and eventually sign. So is that almost the cheat code these days of like going the social route compared to actually having to prove yourself in the mountains? Or do you have to do both regardless?
I think it's really tricky. I think that right now social media is in a really funny place. I think a few years ago, it was more important to have a really great Instagram account, but the way the algorithms are working and the way Instagram's trying to compete with TikTok and what they're trying to put forward, like, so for myself right now, I find that the content that I get more approval for, more likes, etc., is stuff that isn't even necessarily skiing, and you can put up a really amazing get rad photo or beautiful scenic, etc., or a cool line, but I just don't even know how well that stuff is doing anymore. There's just so much content out there these days, and especially scrolling through on an Instagram, everything's so fleeting that it's actually pretty hard to break through the noise and make your mark. And I think that was one of my ideas and desires with making the Here Hold My Kid movie, and also wanting to do a different style of ski movie that's not a typical get rad ski porn movie. And not that we didn't want to still do as cool things on skis as that Jackie and I can. It's just the matter that we wanted to do something different that would just break through the noise, not your typical ski movie, and would entertain people in different ways. And I think that that holds true for just anything that you're trying to do as a professional athlete these days, or at least in a world where, for like skiing and snowboarding, where there's a lot of subjectivity to it. You know, it's one thing when you are a ski racer, and if you're the fastest person down the hill, that's irrefutable. But that's not the case for what we do. You know, it's subjective, and people either really enjoy what they're seeing or they don't.
All right. Well, I think everybody's going to enjoy the movie, which I probably said too many times, but they will. Now I'm going to jump into your childhood and life and times. And you grow up in Alaska, in Girdwood, Alaska. Is it like 20 hours of daylight in the summer and 20 hours of darkness in the winter? And how is that childhood going to be different than what Indy's going to go through?
Well, it is a lot of daylight in the summer, which just gives you tons of energy. Alaskans just go, go, go. For instance, like the salmon runs, they last for like maybe just a few days or a little longer than that. Then you have also a limit of the amount of salmon that you can catch. And so we would do a quote unquote midnight run where you're kind of fudging the system here. So you're only supposed to catch, let's say, a limit of 3 sockeyes within 24 hours. But as Alaskans, we'll interpret that, okay, so it's like, well, today's the 23rd of June and tomorrow's the 24th of June. So you do a midnight run, you go and you fish from 8 to midnight and catch 3 fish. And then once midnight strikes, then it dips into the next day. Well, then you fish the rest of the night. And that's totally possible because it's light out and you just have a ton of energy. In the winter, yeah, it gets a bit harder. I don't remember quite as much. I feel like you go to school in the dark and you come home and it basically gets dark. Now that I'm a little older and I go up there and ski like over the holidays, the shortest time of the year. We were just there this year. In fact, it was incredible skiing. And you just have this alpenglow light through the whole day. Well, it's not the whole day. It's a very short day. And it's amazing. It's just beautiful. But yeah, it's a lack of light for sure. And it can get dark and dreary.
So is it like you're night skiing throughout your whole childhood?
Yeah, so the lights come on at Alyeska, which is so fantastic. The resort doesn't open till 10:30 a.m. And then they turn on the lights and skiing's till 5:30 p.m. And then they also have night skiing. And all the resorts, like around Anchorage, there's some tiny little resorts, like a resort called Alpenglow and another one, Hilltop. And they have light, everywhere has lights because, yeah, otherwise the ski days would be too short. So after school, you go train ski racing and you'd be skiing gates under the lights.
Awesome. And when I think about the mountains of Alaska, I think about big, steep, gnarly stuff like I see in the movies. Is Alyeska more of a challenging ski area than what we see down here in the lower 48? Or what does it compare to in what I'm used to?
Well, I think it has a bit more of a European feel to it almost, and not so much the vast size of the resort. It's still a smaller resort in the sense of acreage, but half the mountain is above tree line. And because you're also right on the coast there, and because of the snowpack, and it being so coastal and it can be raining down low, like you ski the upper half of the mountain. That's where most of the good snow is most of the time. And so you're skiing in the Alpine with no trees. And when you are in midwinter and it's kind of socked in and gray or snowy, or you just don't have that much light, it's a different kind of skiing. The visibility is not amazing. And it really teaches you as a kid growing up how to ski a little differently and ski by feel and not as much. You just can't rely on your visibility as much. It's interesting, but it's fun and different. And it makes me think of like going to Europe a bit more when you are skiing in the Alpine.
Now it's time for my first sponsor break. And I want you to buy all of your ski and snowboard gear from Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Why Peter Glenn? Well, first and foremost, they're the little guy who's been getting people out on snow for over 65 years. They aren't trying to take over an industry by making a ton of branded products that compete with the brands they already sell. They're not trying to get you to stay at a hotel or sell you a vacation. Peter Glenn is about making sure you purchase the right products to ensure that you're going to have the most fun on the hill. And they have all the brands, all the products, and incredible deals both in-store and online. While other retailers focus on algorithms and AI, Peter Glenn is all about having the most knowledgeable staff that understands what you need. And if you've been following them on Instagram, they've been dropping some incredible pro tips that will make your time on the hill more enjoyable. At the end of the day, People have trusted Peter Glenn since 1958 because of their proven track record and all-around passion for snow and beyond. So if you ski, snowboard, inline skate, wakeboard, water ski, or need outerwear for your adventure, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports is your one-stop shop, and they offer free shipping on orders over $50, a hassle-free return policy, and they price-match reputable dealers. So please support this podcast and buy your stuff over at peterglenn.com. Next up, it's Elan Skis. I started telling you about Elan building a cult following in the States about 3 years ago. And if you're like me and heading up to the mountain on a weekly basis, I know you've been seeing more Elans. There's a reason for that. People who ski Elans notice that skiing on award-winning products made in what is considered the best factory in the world will make them a better skier. The product they put into the marketplace is second to none. I mean, Elan's a company that also makes luxury yachts, and they don't cut corners on materials or production. The difference in quality is noticeable. Walk up to any ski wall and compare the craftsmanship of an Elan ski to everything else on the wall. You'll see a difference in the fit and finish, but the most important difference is how they'll perform on snow. That's why Elan's been winning a ton of awards at the magazine tests, because they really do ski better. If you want to have more fun on the mountain this season, get on an Elan. You can find out about all things Elan over at elanskis.com. My final sponsor this round is Stanley, and if you haven't been hearing a lot about Stanley lately, you must be living under a rock. They've absolutely blown up in 2023, and everyone is talking about them. I've been telling you about how incredible their products are at keeping your drinks hotter and colder than anyone else's for about 7 years now. I mean, they invented the category in 1913, and while they always have done well, the world now knows that if you don't have a Stanley, you don't have the best. And I love having the best. Personally, I use Stanley pint glasses every single day, and I swear by them. And my wife and so many others can't live without their Stanley quenchers. And recently, I've integrated Stanley food storage devices into my ski routine. Instead of buying $20 burgers, we bring our food to the mountain and it stays piping hot in our Stanleys. And I end up saving about $70 a weekend not buying food. While that's rad, what's even radder is that Stanley offers Powell Movement listeners their biggest discount that they make available to the public. I'm going to save you 30% on all your Stanley products. Here's what you need to do to get that discount. Head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and at checkout, enter the code SNOW30. That's all caps and the number 30 with no spaces, and you'll save that 30%. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Growing up for you, it was all about ski racing. Your heroes are Tommy Moe and Hillary Lynn. And is Alaska one of those places where everybody knows everyone? Like, are they not only your heroes, but you also know them as people?
Yes, and a little bit of no. I mean, when I was young enough with them that I didn't really know them, enough age separation that I'm just, some kid growing up. One of my close girlfriends that I ski raced with, Kirsten Garrity, her sister, Megan Garrity, who is married to Tommy Moe, and they were dating back when they were both on the ski team. That was kind of like Megan's Kirsten's sister, but we didn't hang out with them. They never saw them. Tommy knows who I am now that we're all older.
Right.
And I'm someone in the industry to some degree. But yeah, you don't know them so much when you're growing up.
And with ski racing, you did the speed events, Super G and downhill, and you got good really fast. But you're from Alaska. Does that make it really hard to get recognized?
Not entirely. Well, the thing is with Alaska, you have to travel for ski racing. And I mean, that's kind of true for anyone. Once you hit 15 and you can start racing FIS, and then you get to a certain level where you can get into certain competitions and things, and your points rank you, and your points are based off of your results. And if you have really good results in races, I mean, I was kind of on the developmental U.S. ski team from the age of right around 15 onward. So it's not so hard to make a name for yourself.
You have to travel to the States, like you said, the States. You're part of the States, but to the lower 48. And in thinking of that, is the financial part of that tough on the family, or was that not an issue for you guys?
No, absolutely. And my parents, they were amazing parents. They didn't worry about driving nice cars. We didn't have a nice house. As long as I did really well in ski racing and I was passionate about it and I did really well at school, that was a must in my household. School could not go by the wayside. Then they did whatever it took to make sure that I was able to pursue my dream of being an Olympic ski racer.
And is that what your heart was set on? Because by the time you're 16, you're like the top 5 in both categories in the whole country. And is it like, I want to make the U.S. ski team and eventually the Olympics, and that's my goal?
Absolutely. Especially back then, free riding was not really a thing. I mean, yes, Warren Miller and Scott Schmidt. And there was that free ski scene, but it wasn't what it is today. There's no, I'm old enough where there wasn't free ride teams for kids. It was only ski team. And ski team, that sounds silly. Only race team.
Yeah,
we called it ski team
about.
because literally there wasn't anything but racing. That's what you did. And I did well at it and I loved it. It's a fantastic foundation for any freeride skier. Cody and I talk about, when Indiana grows up, if he really is into skiing, we'll be putting him gates. He is not going to go straight into freeride because the foundation that it gives you for skiing, for freeriding is unrivaled.
People who have a race background can really bend to ski, and you can see it when they ski, night and day compared to people that don't have that background. But while racing is competitive and it's like a full-on sport, the lifestyle of skiing is kind of the feeling of powder. And is there a moment in time where you realize that feeling and the lifestyle of skiing almost becomes more important than ski racing for like your mind and soul?
I think that is just one perspective of looking at skiing, and like ski racing doesn't have a sense of freedom to it, in a sense of like,
Well, you can't leave the course or anything. You have to do what they say in ski racing for the most part.
Totally. But it wasn't, I guess to me growing up, it was more than just ski racing. I mean, it got me into skiing. It was a community in ski racing. It was the friends and family and all the things that you do and the competitions you would travel to with your friends. That's not any different than being on what is now a freeride team. They're doing the same thing. And same thing, you still are being set like, okay, well, here's your venue. Yes, there's a little more freedom to do what you want to do on the way down, but it's still a very set thing with standards that you have to do to perform to win. So I think in some ways, ski racing really isn't that far off as we'd like to think, especially how much competitions happen in not necessarily the greatest conditions. But that being said, I can look back on my childhood and realize that I missed a couple race starts in my teens due to skiing powder. I had gone off and was just, it was a powder day and show up and miss my race start. And boy, were my parents really not happy about that. Understandably, of course. And I was kind of like, oh, yeah, whoops. But it was so good. The skiing was so good. So I think that any type of skiing that you're doing, it's really just more about the whole sensation you get, the lifestyle, the community, the sense of freedom as a child that you're off doing your own thing with your buddies away from your parents.
Okay. And outside of ski racing, when you think about who you were as a person in high school, you end up with an academic scholarship to New Mexico. So you could have been the nerdy kid. I don't know. But that's wrong for me to assume. Who were you in high school? What music were you into? Were you like the homecoming queen? Did you party? Who was Elyse?
No, I think I was a normal teen. I was not a homecoming queen kind of person. I was into, back then, and especially Alaska being so close, being part of the Pacific Northwest, the whole grunge era. So a lot of that kind of music, a lot of grunge, dressed up in kind of baggier jeans and flannels and Converse shoes. Back then, when I was a teen, they didn't make Converses for girls. And so I bought a pair of guys, but the small shoe size for guys, I remember, was like 2 sizes too big for me, but I didn't care. I still wore them. And I listened to punk, and that was kind of my thing. I dated a guy that was in a band. He played the drums, kind of that like rock and roll, grungy kind of / punky sound.
Okay, and then you go to school in New Mexico, and they have an incredible ski program. Why don't you ski race?
I was burned out on ski racing. So after high school, I actually took a year where I moved to Sun Valley, joined their ski team to continue in my pursuit of making the U.S. ski team. But I really got burnt out on ski racing and wanted to go to college like all my normal friends back home had gone to school. And so I went to University of Mexico because they did have a really good ski team, but because I got an academic scholarship, I didn't have to race, so I just quit. I was done. And it was very interesting. I'm glad I went through it because all of a sudden I had to kind of find an identity for myself. Like I wasn't a ski racer. I was just like a normal student among thousands of other people. So it was a good thing for me to go through. And I learned that I was so broke and there's not much ski culture living in Albuquerque. I mean, yes, there's skiing in New Mexico and it's really fantastic, but it's very limited. And when you go to a school of, 40,000 people, they're not there to go skiing.
Right.
So I didn't ski at all. And I realized I missed skiing. I didn't so much miss the ski racing, but I missed skiing. And on one of my spring breaks, my family was visiting Tahoe, and I had some Alaskan friends that were going to school at University of Nevada, Reno. And so I came and took a break and visited my family and my friends. And that was when the whole freeride scene was really starting to go off here. And I realized like, oh, this is so cool. I really want to be a part of this. And then long story short, I ended up switching schools to University of Nevada, Reno. And that's where I fell into things.
Yeah, and after school, I think you do a year where you're going to ski bum it.
Yeah.
While skiing isn't really competitive at that point in life, it's all about powder days and finding cool lines and stuff like that. It seemed like in a place like Palisades, the friendly competition was all about who was gnarlier. And can you describe who was in the area at that time and what it was like?
Yeah, I was planning to go to law school. Like I just wanted to be a ski bum for a bit and study for my LSATs, etc. And the scene was such this scene at Palisades.
It was like the perfect time in the world to be there, like when everything was happening.
It totally was, and funny enough, Ingrid Backstrom, she was becoming like the it girl, wow, like mind-breaking segment. And oh my gosh, this is my brain deadness right now from the Super Bowl hangover. What's match 6? You're going to remember.
Yearbook.
Thank you. Yearbook was like, she had that segment under her belt, and it was one of those things that besides the scene in general, but it was inspirational for me because Ingrid and I were the same age and we had grown up ski racing together and we were friends. We'd been friends since we were 14 years old.
Oh, cool. And
so for me, it made it also feel attainable. I wasn't like, oh, she can do that, I can do that. I was like, wow, like there's a path, like Ingrid grew up ski racing. This makes sense. And like, look at what she's doing. I can give this a go too, like, man, pretty impressive what she was doing back then. And with that too, then the rest of the scene in general, and I met Cody, and it wasn't that I was seeking to try and be a pro skier even at this point, even though I'm just talking about Ingrid being inspirational, but it was more like, oh, just to be a part of this, like, let's go get rad, right? And it was Cody that pushed me into, well, he realizes like, wow, Elyse, you actually are pretty talented at this. And what you should do is try doing a freeride competition. It's a really good way to learn how to freeride. I mean, that actually is like freeride competition. There's a lot of things that you can take from it and apply to freeriding and filming and whatnot. It's a really good way to hone your skills, so to speak, and get your name out there.
Cody suggests that you enter that competition in 2007. Can you explain the almost disappointment after that first competition and what that does to light a fire under you?
Oh my goodness. So I entered the first competition and I was the first bib one. And in competition too, back then, or when you're in these IFSA competitions, it can really help to have an established name. So they kind of pay attention to what you're doing. And I was bib one, new in the scene. No one knew who I was. And I skied pretty conservatively because it was day one. It was the qualifiers. I'm like, okay, I just got to make it to day 2. And I didn't qualify. And I was so bummed and pissed and upset and like, just, oh my God, how did I not qualify? I'm a better skier than this. How did the judges not realize that? And I took from it the biggest lesson that if you don't ski to your potential, you can't expect to be judged any particular way. And I didn't ski to my potential. I didn't ski as good as I should have. So I shouldn't expect results to come that I wasn't necessarily deserving. So Cody was out of town. And I remember getting on the phone with him later that evening, like, oh, that poor guy heard an earful for sure. But once the dust settled and I had that realization I just mentioned. So I had another competition lined up in Tahoe a few weeks later, and I sacked up and went. And I took that new approach of like, you just got to ski like you know how to ski. And I did. And I ended up winning. And that was that. And so the hard lesson learned at the first competition was a beautiful thing.
And you end up crushing it that year. Your second total on the tour or overall on the tour. And the next season, the Freeride World Tour takes over and you're not invited right away. Is that the first time you realized how unfair the industry is? Or did you already know that and then this is just a slap in the face?
No, I wasn't really getting into too much like the industry. It's a little bit, it can be a little rough when you're a female per se, because I hadn't done that much competition. And the new Freeride World Tour that was emerging, a lot of the tour results to get on this tour had to do with a lot of European competitions. And I just hadn't done any of that stuff before. So I wasn't surprised that I wasn't qualified. But lo and behold, luckily, the very first tour stop they were doing was at Mammoth, and they were having qualifiers before that event. That was it. I had to go down and do that qualifier. I had an opportunity. And if I did well, then I would get into the Fred World Tour. So that was my goal. And I did. I won that qualifier and got a wild card.
While we're not going to talk about the comps in that Freeride World Tour, can you describe how dominant you were that first year?
Well, yeah. I mean, I won 3 of the 4 Freeride World Tour competitions that they held to win that overall title. So, yeah, I guess that speaks for itself.
And when you win that much, there should be a lot of prize money. How much do you actually walk away from when you win 75% of the contests?
Well, you don't. I mean, you're making a third of what the men are making. But I guess it was early enough in my career that, like, I'm not necessarily still thinking in any long game that I still want to be a professional skier. I was in my late 20s and I was kind of like on a ride. I didn't focus on my earnings of what I was making from these competitions. As long as I could get to these competitions and cover my costs. And yeah, I think like if I just didn't focus on that side of it, then I would perform better. You know, like you focus on doing the best that you can with the skiing and not worrying about the results. The results will come if that's the case. So I was lucky to make money. To me, it just felt like, oh, wow, look at this, all this extra cash that I've made at the end of the year. This is fantastic.
Well, it's like you walked with maybe $9,000 instead of the $36,000 that the guy who won 3 contests got. And maybe if you had that extra money, it might have changed the way that you looked at your career early on. But it was almost like you were happy to be there in the beginning. And then things start to change where it's like you can only take so many slaps in the face, I would think. And the big one is like in the summer of 2010, the powers that be decide that they're going to demote the woman from the Freeride World Tour to the qualifying series tour, which is kind of ridiculous. What goes through your head when you hear this?
That was incredibly unfortunate news to hear that they were thinking of demoting. Well, not even thinking that they were. They actually just went ahead and let us know at the end of that summer that they were going to be demoting the women to the freeride qualifying series with the men. And there were different ways that they kind of said why this would be beneficial, but it wouldn't. Like there's no way you could spin it that how it would be beneficial for women. So myself and some of the girls that were on the tour, we started talking and we were like, how do we deal with this? And I ended up offering to like, well, hey, I'll write a letter and be at the head of this and throw a counter argument why this is so detrimental to the tour. You know, it's a business. It's like you can't just play the card of like, well, this is bad for women. Like that doesn't necessarily mean anything when it's a business, but you had to play the card of why it would be bad for the tour in general. And so I wrote this letter with this counter argument and I sent it not just to the tour, but to the sponsors.
What a boss move that was.
And I got all the women, well, most of the women on the Freeride World Tour, skiers and snowboarders, signed this letter and sent it. And they reversed course, which is fantastic because, you know, it's crazy to think about. It wasn't that long ago. That was like a decade ago, a little over a decade ago when they were trying to do that. And it just shows how far things have come because now, a few years ago, women now receive equal prize money, which is great. And, you know, I think just in general, too, movies as well. You know, back then they really stuck to that token female syndrome. And now when you watch a Matchstick or TGR movie, there's multiple women, quite a few. So how things change. But the thing is, you have to get it in motion somehow. You know, people aren't going to make those changes if they don't see the benefit of them. And I think that a lot of people were pretty narrow-minded back then.
It's time for my final sponsor break, and I can't tell you how much I love my gear from Outdoor Research. When I signed on with OR, I knew there wasn't an outerwear brand on the market that performs as well as what OR is developing. That's what happens when you test your gear in the absolutely terrible conditions that we can get here in the Pacific Northwest. Days in the mountains are always more fun when you're warm and dry, and I know my OR gear will always deliver that. I'll tell you, on cold days, I live in my cold front hoodie, which is hands down the warmest and most stylish puffy I've ever owned. And then when I get on snow, my snow crew jacket and pants are not only warm, but it's one of those fits where if you don't see me ski, I look like a pro. I'm so impressed with the style that OR has been bringing to the table lately. And off snow, they sent me some Feroci pants, which are now my daily drivers. Think stylish, lightweight, packable, do-anything pants with the right amount of zippered pockets and stretch to be the only pant that you'll ever need. I've been loving OR products since I bought my first OR rain jacket in 2000. And really, if you missed out on using my old discount code for OR products, well, I'm working on getting you a new code, but I can't promise anything. Sometimes you snooze, you lose. So check back for that, and in the meantime, head on over to outdoorresearch.com and check out why they're one of the fastest growing brands in snow and beyond. My final sponsor this round is Best Day Brewing. If you haven't heard of Best Day, they are hands down the best tasting non-alcoholic beer on the market. I enjoy Best Day for so many reasons. The flavor is the most important. I swear by the hazy IPA, the Kolsch, and the Belgian White. They all taste just as good or better than their alcoholic cousins. And I'll tell you, while I haven't quit drinking, when I go to the bar, after 3 or 4 beers, I usually feel like it's time for me to head home, and everyone thinks I'm lame. But lately, I have a new routine. I'll have a Best Day every 3rd beer, and it makes my night last twice as long. And we all know lasting longer is better. If you want to have your best day or night ever, or just enjoy a few cold ones at Après, grab a Best Day, and you can forget about the calories, forget about the alcohol, and forget about getting in trouble on the way home. To see all the flavors and order some beer, head on over to bestday.com. And if you're flying Alaska, you can now get a Best Day Kolsch at 30,000 feet. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. Thinking about you taking that leadership position, because that's kind of what you're doing there, but you're also putting yourself at risk because you're speaking on behalf of all the women on the tour. Do you think when you're about to send this email to the guys who are running the show and then the sponsors as well, is it like you're taking this big risk almost for all women, but you know it's a career risk?
Absolutely. When it's the emails coming from your email and your name's at the top of it, and you're kind of leading the charge. Yeah, it is a risk. But back then it was so black and white to me. It was like, this is just what we have to do, and I know some of the other women, there are a few other prominent women on the tour that they were willing to sign the letter, but not have it come from them because there was some ties with some sponsor stuff that they were really worried about. So I don't know. I definitely took a big risk there, but it was worth it. And it's funny because then I tried that tactic not too much longer down the road with a major sponsor of mine, talking about some of the women's issues and like how, because it was so obvious to me at that point of what I was getting paid versus the men, the opportunities I was receiving versus the men on the team. And the whole idea that the squeaky wheel gets the grease, but it wasn't the case. And it actually led to my demise with that particular sponsor. So I've come out on top trying to lead, for women in our sport. And I've also personally taken a massive hit for doing it. So that's part of the journey. And I'm just one of those people that when I feel strongly about stuff, I don't really sit back and shut up.
So it sounds like not sitting back and shutting up has won one for you. It's lost one for you. But in thinking about it with sponsors, because you brought them up, and when you look at it, they might not even be your sponsors, but who is the best in the industry about inclusion before it became a hot button? Who is that brand that's always done the right thing? Is there anybody that you can think to, whether you work with them or not?
I can't really say because, and there's some layers to this, and there's a lot of nuance to this, and not trying to ruffle feathers too much. But let's put it this way. Even if imagery by brands come out with a lot of female stuff, are they paying the women the same as their men counterparts? 99% of the time, no. That's still like the fight right now. I think most women, we still don't quite make what the men do. And that's across the board for all brands. With my own brands, I have some amazing support that support women in their sports, but I also know it's just still different with men. They're just seen differently. So yeah, I can't say that any brand, unless it was like a strictly female brand, that women haven't been treated, and some brands are much better than others, for sure, to this day. And I feel like obviously the brands, as we have just discussed for the last bit of time, you can see that I'm someone that feels pretty strongly about this stuff. And I'm always trying to do my workings, at least internally, to get to a place where there's equality. And I have great relationships with my sponsors. But yeah, there's still been internal struggles for sure.
And what's comical, actually, it's not comical. What actually sucks about all this is I watched your Alpenglow speaker series thing a few weeks ago. You did great. But there was a dude in the comments saying things the whole time like, there she goes, blaming men again. Do you get that shit a lot on social media? And what's the worst of that you get in your DMs?
No, I never saw the comments from that speaker series, and someone brought it up to me that there was a troll, but I didn't ever actually get to see it.
I took screenshots.
Did you? What a douche. Not you, this guy, whoever was doing this. I don't get too ruffled by that stuff. And in general, if you get a random comment like that personally, I don't usually comment back. You just block them, but if that too, there's going to be people like that are always like that out there. I mean, if you want to talk about like on that massive scale that we're watching right now, especially like, hate to turn this back to the Super Bowl or football, with Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift, and how many people have hate over this Taylor Swift. And it's like, what is wrong with this, people? Like, it's a woman that just happens to be involved with football, and she gets a lot of attention because she's so incredibly powerful, but like, she's a very, very positive person. And she does nothing but great things. And it doesn't matter if you like her music or not. Why do you care if she's at a football game? And why do you care if people are interested because of her being in football? Like, that's great. You're just expanding the reach of something. So when she popped up on the screen, because they'll at the game, they'll show celebrities, like during a commercial break, and she popped up on the screen and people start booing. And I turned to Cody, I'm like, why are people booing her? This makes no sense. And he's like, oh, it's actually probably because it's 49ers fans because she's a Chiefs fan. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, well, then I should be booing her too. but it's more on the scale of like, I think there's just plenty of people that just have this animosity about a powerful woman. And it's so ridiculous.
Well, I was really excited to see her a lot on screen just because I thought it was funny that it was pissing people off. And yeah. I also thought it was not funny, but it's true, that she was the most important person in that stadium by far. Like, more important than any player on that field was her. And the fact that people couldn't recognize that, I mean, she's there to spectate and watch a game, but that's just a fact of the matter. And it's pretty awesome to have a woman be the most important story at a Super Bowl, in my opinion.
Totally. I love that take on it. I mean, there's so many ways you can look at it. And her expanding this whole fun sport to masses that may never have been involved with it. You see the stories of like daughters like actually being interested in the game that never would have. And I think that's great because I love football. It's so much fun. So anyway, to me, it's like men sometimes feeling like as if they're going to lose a hold of their power or something, but that's not the case at all. And even in the case with women in sports in general, it's like, we're not trying to usurp men. We're just asking for this, equality. We're asking to be recognized in the same way and get some of the same opportunities.
So you've asked for that and you've made a big difference on the Freeride World Tour level, but then you do what everybody does and you leave the Freeride World Tour to film. Why does everyone who can do that? They leave as soon as they possibly can. Why is that?
I don't know if it's as soon as possibly as they can. Especially when you look at someone like Jackie, who plugged away at it for a very long time. But I think that was always my end goal as a North American skier, for notoriety and for better sponsorships and taking your skills to the next level and gaining everything, like taking yourself as a professional athlete to the next level. It's all about film skiing. And there's sponsors that they don't care about the tour, especially as a North American athlete, because it just doesn't have the same power over here. It doesn't resonate the same way.
Doesn't sell skis that much either.
No, and it's a really big deal in Europe. Like for Europeans, that is how you make your name and how you become a well-paid professional skier. But that's not how you do it over here. And so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to move on and create more challenges for myself. I won the overall title. fantastic. And now I wanted to do something different. And honestly, too, remember, you've peppered in there how competitions is not always the best conditions. In film skiing, it is.
Yep.
Well, it should be in theory.
You wait for it if you can. If you have the time, you're going to sit around and wait until it's perfect.
Or you just do your best to make it look like it was phenomenal, which is kind of the same thing.
Ski acting.
Yeah, exactly.
And so this is kind of the part that we had gotten to earlier where you had a sponsor trying to push to get you in a movie. The film company didn't put you in the movie. That's a loss of exposure for you. You might have lost exposure there, but something else that I've heard is that there's a poster of you and Amy Ingebrigtsen flashing the tram in the slot bar that I have to see for the ultimate exposure of Elyse. Is that still hanging up in the slot bar right now?
It is. I'm sure it. I actually haven't been in the slot bar in a while. I'm
a parent.
Nowadays, I'm a parent. That's not really an activity of mine. But yes, I mean, you can't see much. You just see the act of flashing the tram. It was for an arcade ad. Yep, arcade's first poster. So that exists.
All right. And so we talked about you not getting into that first movie, but at this point, you're the Freeride World Tour champion. You're a badass, and you know you're a badass. What does it do to your head when you find out that someone's not going to let you ski in your movie? Is it like, I've done everything I can possibly do to be here, and now you're not letting me play?
Well, at this point, you start to realize, like, it's really hard as a female. And you just kind of have to figure, okay, well, if I'm not going to get my chance there, yeah, I'm bummed. I'm butthurt. But that doesn't define me. I need to continue to do things to prove myself. I need to continue to do things to create those opportunities. And if it's not there, then let's go figure out another way to do what I want to do, And one of my next goals, I'm a pretty goal-oriented person. And I think that really, really helps someone like myself to just keep focused and figure out why you want to keep moving forward. And it was to win Best Female Performance at the Powder Awards.
That is a huge, huge goal. And you also have a huge hurdle that you're up against because you're not filming for a movie, but Powder requires that to win a Powder Award, the segment has to be part of a ski film that was selling DVDs, which is crazy at the time. But did you call them on that? Like, what the hell? What if I have the best segment and it's not on a DVD? I can't get nominated for an award?
Yeah. Well, that's how it came out. So when the collab, without having to go into all of that, the end game, when I brought it up to Powder, talked to them about submitting the segment, they're like, oh, it's an online edit. It can't be submitted. And you're like, no, TGR turned it into a DVD. Like, you have to accept this, and I think it kind of spurned then TGR going ahead and submitting segments and, and then other things from that movie too, that goes towards the other awards like Best Line and Best Natural Air and all those things for other people that got into the DVD with their collab segments, like Nick McNutt, for instance.
When the collab thing happens, it's like almost a small miracle happens for you because Lindsay Dyer comes around and says, hey, I'm going to do an all-female film. I'm going to collect footage from all these women, and we're going to make a movie out of it. And it's like, your first question, is there going to be a DVD?
Well, at that point there is, because back then if you're making a movie, it's going to turn into a DVD. That was the only way it worked. Like, there weren't online movies. It was, that format didn't really exist yet. There were online edits out there, but not movies. That was just not the way to devour that type of media.
So with Lindsay's project, it makes it seem like you were going to have a part in a DVD, but then she decides to make it a 2-year project. Is that like a punch in the stomach? Like, oh, now I have to figure this thing out again? Yeah,
totally. The only reason why I felt that way was because, well, 2 reasons. One was at the beginning of the year, like, that was my goal. It all of a sudden really turned into, this is my goal for the year. Like, I had it in the back of my head that I would love to achieve trying to win Best Female Performance, but it really solidified at the beginning of the year that I'm going to put all my effort in this particular ski season to doing that. And when she said that, I was bummed because I had actually started filming enough and was sitting on some pretty good footage at that point. And that's when it dawned on me that TGR was running this contest, this total one-off contest called the Collab, and anyone could enter. And I had never even considered this contest because anyone could enter, and the grand prize was $100,000.
Crazy.
so many men and professional skiermen, like Sage Cadrigoloso, I know was entering, like, how am I going to compete against that? So that's why I never even considered it. But I realized that this contest, what was going on is the top 10 edits would be compiled into a DVD. And I figured, you know what? I think, naively or not, that is where I have a chance. Like, yeah, it would have been nice to win $100,000, but again, like, you can't focus on that kind of stuff. You can't sit there and dream. It's like you just got to put in all the work, and if that's what the end outcome is, fantastic. So I continued to film the remainder of that winter, and Matt Sheridan of Team 13, he had done a few movies back in the day. He's a really good buddy of Cody and mine, and he did the edit for me. All with the idea that, like, okay, well, if we end up winning, then I will split my proceeds with whoever helped me out with this. But otherwise, it's just friends filming each other. Like, Cody came out a few days when he wasn't filming with Matchstick at the time, just to point the camera at his wife. And I was with a couple other buddies. In particular, most of the filming was with Corey Filton and Austin Gibney. And Austin had a camera, and so we would just film each other on his camera. And it's funny because the edit, which still lives online, is in black and white. And the reason why it's black and white is because I remember Matt being like, the color correcting would be so difficult to do because it just, it's so many random shots and crappy shots. But it didn't matter because it was all about the skiing. Like, sometimes when you watch the big movies, Matchstick and TJR movies, and the cinematography can really help a ski segment. But if the skiing is powerful enough, you don't have to worry as much about the cinematography. And so that was kind of my case. And yeah, so submitted it. And the public, there was over 100 men or so that entered. And the public ended up voting myself into, like, I made in the top 5, I believe. And well, not I believe, I know.
Yeah.
And then there was another round where it was an internal round of the athletes that were competing and TGR people that voted, like, who ended up was the real winner. But yeah, I got voted into that top round by the public. So I made the DVD.
When you find out that you made that round, that you actually get on the DVD, is it one of those things where you're celebrating like you wanted a Powder Award because it actually can get you in the Powder Awards?
Totally. I mean, I don't quite remember. I'm sure there was a sense of relief. I can't really quite remember how it felt, but winning the Powder Award was pretty amazing. Like, but you're right, because I think, like, because Powder at first, when it was brought up to them of getting to submit that particular segment, and they at first, like, were like, no, nope. And you're like, wait, I remember literally, like, breaking down into tears. Like, what do you mean no? Like, I've done everything to finally, get to this point, and you're still saying no. So I do remember having that emotional moment now that I think about it, when they were originally saying no. But then it all worked out.
Boom, your goal's achieved. You win the Best Female Performance. You win the awards at IF3 as well. And when you achieve a goal like that just seems so unreal to a lot of people. I mean, maybe you in your head, like when you set that goal in August of, I'm going to win Best Female Performance of the Year, it's like something that motivates you. But to other people, it's kind of like, well, I mean, that's a crazy kind of goal. She's got a chance, sure. But I mean, who can say before the season even starts that they're going to win Female Part of the Year? What's that like when you actually realize the dream?
Well, I think to get to an end goal like that, there's so many steps. And if you just kind of focus on putting one foot in front of the other with those steps, so to speak, it's like you don't ever really get too worried as long as you just keep building off of what you're doing. And then when you finally get there, you're like, oh, all right. I crossed the finish line. Amazing. Like, it is a fantastic feeling. And I will say this too, it's like knowing that it was very self-produced, self-motivated, that mentality that, like, oh, no one can take this away from me. Like, I truly earned this. Because sometimes movie companies pull the trump card on athletes and be like, oh, well, I made your, you'd be nobody without me, kind of thing. I've heard that before. So this is one of those things where it's like, well, it's pretty undisputable that, like, I wasn't given the silver spoon, so to speak, to get to where I got to. And because of that, I'm very proud of that, and it just makes me feel like, all right, if I put my mind to something, I can achieve it. I just got to put in motion how to figure out how to do it. And then it's really funny because that whole saying of like, it's all about the journey, it's not really about the end goal. It's like, it truly is that. But you never feel that way until you get across the finish line. Sometimes the across the finish line may not be the ultimate result you want. In this case, we're talking about me winning the Powder Video Award, Best Female Segment. So yes, I did get the achievement that I had set out to do. But even if I hadn't, I learned so much in that process of what it takes and how to be self-reliant and self-motivated that I feel like I can apply that to anything in life. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's kind of that bigger thing where like it really is about the journey. And I know that, we haven't touched on it all, but, my husband being Cody Townsend and his 50 project, I mean, it really is about the journey. He does have this massive end goal, but this whole process that he's going through and what he's learned and the people that he gets to do this with along the way. Yeah, really, that's what makes it.
That was a huge jumping off point for your career in terms of that collab contest, because you were already on the map, but that did so much more for you. It also did the same for McNutt. One thing that you and Nick have in common, unfortunately, is you've both been in avalanches, serious ones. We talked about the Tunnel Creek avalanche where you were involved. Chris Rudolph and Jim Jack passed away. We talked about that on the podcast we did with Powder a long time ago, so I'm going to leave that there. But you bring up Cody and his 50 project, and thinking of you as a mom, you guys both put so much risk on the line for your careers over the years. Now you have a little kid. Does all of that change for you at all? Or does any of that change for you at all?
Well, yes, it does. And then it also doesn't. And the thing is, when you get to this point in your career, like Cody and I are very similar. And like, we don't actually have necessarily a high risk tolerance. What we're doing, there's been so much experience built up to this point that when I'm skiing a line, I'm not like, well, I hope this turns out okay. It's like, I know that I can do this. Maybe when I was younger, I could see a little more bravado and kind of feeling out, pushing my limits and seeing what's possible. And I've been doing this for so long, I kind of know what's possible and what's not possible. And I'm also at a point, and maybe this is where the motherhood comes in, but I also think it's an age thing too. I'm old enough now where it's like, okay, I don't need to push it more than kind of what I feel like I'm already capable of doing. So because of that, I'm taking less risk, if that makes sense. I'm not taking less risk just because I have a kid, but that's because there's a lot that goes into my decision making to get to that point of whatever I'm standing on top of and what I'm about to ski.
Okay. And then, in filming with Cody, I think in Drop Everything is probably the first movie that you shoot on the MSP level with Cody. Is it different when you've got your partner with you when you're shooting? Does it create more pressure? Does it make you more relaxed? How does that go?
It's not more pressure. Oh gosh, Cody's one of the best ski partners for me. He always has been ever since the get-go. And in fact, he helps push me to do stuff. But that being said, it's so funny. I will get nervous for him for what he's going to ski, which is ridiculous that I'm going to get nervous for him versus sitting there next to Mark Abba. It's not like to say that like as if Mark is just a better skier than Cody. So that's why I'm not nervous for him. It has nothing to do with that. It's like it's your partner. And I would get ridiculously nervous for certain things. And it'd be so stupid. But it was wonderful to work with him because we're on the same page. We know what each other's capable of. We know how to kind of help keep each other focused if needed. Sometimes the only downside is, you can have a shorter wick for someone. Mm-hmm. And with Cody, so one of his things is he's really good at scoping a line, picking out, like, so you show up to, if you're filming, you show up to a face and you don't have very long, you got to pick out a line and figure it out, and you got to get to the top because you're always racing against time or racing against light, racing against whatever. There's always, you just always have to be really fast. And he's really good at it. And it's so funny because with me, he just expects me to be on the same page and just be super, super quick. And he'll get real testy with me about it. And so I've warned people, like, it's so funny. Some other people have been like, well, like other females, like, well, are there any tips like of filming with Cody? I'm like, well, and I'll also remind Cody, I'll be like, don't be as harsh with them on picking lines and being quick about it. And he's not. He's like totally mellow with everyone else. So it's just, that's one of those great couple of things, you know. But on the same token, as much as annoying that can be, he also has helped that process of making me quicker at it, because you have to be. There's no advantage to sitting there and taking your sweet time.
And then I feel like the next MSP movie is a big one for equality in ski movies. All In
Yes.
featured just as many women as men, and you have a
Yep.
standout part in it. Does it make for a better mountain experience when you have more women on set with you? On snow with you?
On snow? Well, it is on set, though. It really is. Yeah, it can be. I think the point of that movie was just trying to showcase that women are just as good as the men. There can be different dynamics, you know, because some of that was we were skiing with just women. Some of it was we were skiing with men and women. You know, like a good chunk of that filming was done around Pemberton, Whistler, British Columbia, and it was Michelle, Cody, and Abba and I filming together, you know, and then that's a great dynamic. It'd be really fun because Michelle and I, the one thing about is being a female, and you're generally, when you're the only female, you kind of learn how to push yourself. That's just, you kind of have this extra gumption to yourself. Otherwise, you wouldn't be there. So when you add another female into the dynamic, it can be really fantastic because you all of a sudden have someone that is in your likeness. And so you feel inspired by to actually step it up. And then so by the time when we got to Alaska and it was Angel, Michelle, and I, you know, like, yeah, that's a great dynamic because you actually feel a little bit of that good pressure of like, okay, I need to go ski hard. I need to go throw down. And even if you're not feeling it and you have someone that makes you, like I said, in your likeness, it makes you feel more inspired to just go step it up.
And with that one, you win another Powder Award for Best Female Part.
Yeah.
When that happens, does it mean as much as the first time when it was your goal before the season started and it was like this huge jump off point for you? Or is it just another award that you win and it's like really nice to have to your collection and a nice night, but it doesn't have that same impact?
It has a lot of impact. It's just in a very different way. It's a different inflection point in my career. You know, I finally, after so many years, so even after the Best Female Performance or the collab, you would almost think, okay, well, now finally there's a time where these film companies would be like, okay, great, let's film. And I didn't get a phone call for probably another almost 5 years or something after that point, right? Like,
That's crazy.
yeah, you know, and it's just kind of indicative of just where the ski industry was at that time. And it also depends on like your sponsors and stuff too. And if you don't have the right sponsors helping you, that also is part of the problem. So back to the All In, when I won that award, no, it meant a lot because that movie was really important to me personally. It was important to all of us women that were a part of it. Before that movie happened, Ingrid was supposed to be a part of it too. She just I was with her, our literal first day of filming, she blew her patellar tendon.
Yeah.
So it was originally going to be the five of us. And that early summer maybe it was coming out of that winter. I mean, I remember Michelle and I having discussions and then all of us girls having discussions of like, we really want to do a movie together because that just wasn't happening. And we presented it. Ingrid took the helm of this. She had presented it matchstick bit. And I kind of felt like on my personal side, and I think the other girls felt this way too, it was like kind of like, okay, this is an important movie to us. We need to ski our asses off. It's kind of like Matchstick was even kind of taking a chance on this, you know, like having not very many men in their movie and having such a large female presence. So it felt very important to really showcase our skills and show that women could carry a movie. So when I won an award out of that, it wasn't so much the award of being the best female. It was more like your hard work paid off. You know, like you did justice to really putting an effort in to help further this whole imagery that women belong, you know. So one of my big things too is going on a little digression here.
Sure.
It's really important sometimes. So when you're trying to create space for categories that haven't really been there, sometimes it's really important to just kind of show it and make it seem like it belongs there instead of just talking at an audience, you know, like there's a place for that, that sometimes audiences need to be educated on what's going on and the inequalities for whoever feels that is not receiving the same
Chance.
opportunities, right? So who, if someone's not feeling the same opportunities, etc. But at a certain point, you can lose an audience pretty fast because people don't feel like to necessarily be talked down to. And then especially when it's in a sport like skiing, where skiing is a place where people like to escape from all the things in life that like make you feel bad. And I think also that skiing is a place where it's a pretty privileged sport, right? Like it takes money to be able to do this. And even though myself and I know many people around me, it's not like I grew up in a house that had a lot of money to do it. My parents figured out ways. And so I've figured out a way to make this as a career. But the point being, it's still privileged.
For sure.
At the end of it all, right? So people don't want to sit and listen to privileged people whine. I mean, it's not that necessarily people are whining, but it can come off that way pretty quickly, or people are pretty quickly to judge it that way. But by doing things, and this is where Here Hold My Kid comes into play for me, that my next step of like with motherhood and putting females as the centerpiece. But this is the same with All In, that like, if you just kind of put stuff in it, it's like the same kind of movie. And you're not telling people, oh, we just never felt like we got the same chances as men and blah, blah, blah. And we just start talking about it, you just immediately lose people. But if you can just put it out there, it's like, cool, okay, yeah, this is the new norm.
No, that makes sense. And while we could keep going because I have a lot more questions, I'm not going to pepper you with all of them. I am going to say that I would think there had to be a little bit of a fear that when you got pregnant that not everybody was going to stand by you because you're not really sure how the industry is going to deal with a situation like this, a situation that everyone seems to go through. It just happens to be females that go through it, but everybody has this going if they're having a family. Was there a worry, and did all your sponsors stick by you?
Yeah, absolutely. All my sponsors stuck by me, which is fantastic. But I was worried. Even though I felt like if anyone shouldn't be worried, it should be myself, because I have this very long history career of lots of achievements and working my ass off. Definitely not just sitting by waiting for people to do things to make things happen for me. But I was still worried. And I like to bring up the story of, like the timing of it. Like it's a very valid worry because not that long ago, like it's all these little things that compile as to where you get to this point. And not that long ago, I believe 2018, 2019, I love to bring this up as just a really good example. Allison Felix, one of the most female, no, not even just female, just decorated U.S. track and field stars. At this point, she had like 5 or 6 Olympic gold medals, 11 world championships. She got pregnant and she was under negotiation with Nike, and they wanted to cut her pay by 70%.
Huh.
And which is just incredible, right? And this was not that long ago, a few years ago. They came to us, it was at a standstill. It was never resolved. What did happen was Allison Felix went and did an op-ed for the New York Times bringing this situation up. And then what came out of that was, I believe, a congressional hearing. But she didn't end up signing with Nike. She didn't getting that resolved. She signed with a new sponsor. I'm sure things have changed with Nike now. But point being that when you see someone like that high profile of a female athlete, and a sponsor that seems like they should be getting on board with that, they go through that, there's a lot of reason to think that why would things be so different with myself, And I also know another female in skiing who, when she got pregnant, her sponsor cut her pay in half, and she was meant to feel like she was lucky to still have a sponsor. So, yeah. But as I just mentioned, my sponsors are supporting me, and they're fully embracing the new version of me. And I think too, as an athlete, I'm also not like, well, I'm just going to sit back and just be a mom, but I still want you to pay me. It's more like, no, let's continue this. This is the new phase. The thing about skiing too is it's all about marketing, and women, mothers, are a massive market, right? And they really haven't been given any attention. And so it's a huge opportunity for brands to get on board. We're so focused, we have been so focused, and a lot of it has to do with performance, but skiing is still, it's a very subjective sport, and it's all about trying to sell people stuff at the end of the day. Why not get on board with marketing to moms? Because moms don't hang up their skis just because they have a family. And in fact, I say if a mom skis, the whole family skis.
Moms are the major decision makers, for sure.
Yeah, well, I don't know what the new, because this is an old statistic that has been around for a very long time, but the statistic is women make 85% of the household economic decisions.
No, I could see that. And men make 15% of the wrong household economic decisions, in my opinion. But we are almost at your hard stop point, so I've got to get to the last segment of the show. It's called Inappropriate Questions. I get someone that you know to ask 3 questions. They can be anything. I was able to get a woman that you were in a fight with recently. Well, a fight in your movie. She's another badass big mountain skier and a fellow newish mom. I'm talking about Jackie Paaso. And are you ready for question number 1 from Jackie?
Yes, I am.
All right.
Hey, Elyse. Jackie here. My first question to you is about age. I read in the news the other day about India's Rohan Bopanna, who recently became the doubles world number 1 in the latest ATP rankings. And he's also the oldest, aged 43 years, 331 days. And when I looked at a picture of him, I thought, oh my God, he looks so old. And then I realized that I'm only 2 years younger than him, give or take. So do you have that same realization that you feel kind of young until you see somebody that's about the same age? Because I do every time.
Absolutely. God, it is so hard getting older. Like, I know that we're supposed to just embrace it. And in a lot of ways, I really try to, but you can't help it. I mean, my body feels like it's put together by duct tape these days. I mean, after we get off this chat, I'm going to physical therapy. I basically have lived in physical therapy for like the last 3-4 years. If it's not one thing, it's another with me. And that is what is so hard. It's not even so much what you look like, it's kind of how your body feels. And I am constantly doing things to try and keep going. I envy the professional athletes like the Tom Bradys and the Russell Wilsons who...
I wouldn't envy Russell Wilson right now.
No, but what he's done, I've just listened to an interview one time, I think it was on Bill Simmons or probably Ryan Russillo. They talked about how much money he spends on maintaining his physical abilities. And it's incredible what these guys have at their disposal to keep themselves going, and I just wish I had that luxury to have more ability to keep going. I agree. Russell Wilson is literally my least favorite player in the NFL. I absolutely despise that guy.
Well, I can't say I despise him, but I will say that if I'm hiring a guy to make my body and my game better, I'm hiring Tom Brady's guy, not Russell's guy, because as Russell's gotten older, he's gotten worse.
I 100% agree with you on that. The other person they talked about was LeBron James also. Same thing. They were discussing like how they had hyperbaric chambers installed in their houses and all the people they have around them, I'm a little envious for sure.
I'm going to text you a picture that I saw the other day of his feet, and it is so disgusting. It makes any skier's feet look great. But I'm going to jump into question number 2 because of time right now. Here we go.
Yep.
When we started planning for Here Hold My Kid, we had children that were under a year old. And we basically decided that we were going to travel across the world a few times with 1-year-olds. Now that our children are 2 and about to turn 2, looking back, would you make the same choice again?
Now, I want to change your question to, what was the worst thing that happened when you were traveling with such a young kid? Did you ever have to go to the bathroom on the airplane and he exploded diapers all over you or anything like that?
Yes, yeah, I do have that story. This will take a few minutes, but yeah, I do. Okay, so the thing about traveling with young kids is, well, you just get sick all the time. This starts in Switzerland. So we travel over to Switzerland, and dealing with the jet lag with a 1-year-old is really difficult. In Indy, because we had a partnership with My Switzerland, when we arrive in Lucerne, we have to do a bunch of this lifestyle-y filming, but we had this guide who was taking us everywhere and we couldn't get back and get Indy any rest. And so he got sick. So we get to Andermatt, and this is when it really kicks in. We go out our first day skiing. The first few days there, the snow conditions aren't great, not a big deal. Cody and I are out skiing, trying to just work out the jet lag, etc. And that afternoon, we get a phone call from daycare, day one, that you need to come pick up your kid. He's got a fever.
Frustrating.
Yeah, so we do. Okay. Well, luckily, his bug, he's vomiting in the middle of the night, he's got a fever and stuff. We end up bad enough where we do take him to the doctor there, but just normal flu stuff, seemingly not a whole lot they can do. And it passes pretty quickly. Well, we happen to be staying in the same apartment with Jackie, Reina, and Tor. So Indy passes this on to Tor, and Tor gets sick. So this is at the beginning of the week. Now we're approaching the weekend, and it's lining up to be a bluebird pow day on Saturday. And we had it worked out because we had normal daycare lined up in Andermatt where, taking him to a daycare spot, and it's only a Monday through Friday thing. One of the women said that they would watch our boys on Saturday for us. Well, the unfortunate thing was Tor was still sick. So Reina is going to have to stay home with Tor. Well, unfortunately, that also means now Cody can't come out and film with us because we can't have a babysitter that is at a daycare come in and watch Indy and be around sick Tor in the same place.
Okay.
And so Cody has to stay home. Okay, so lots of puking and diarrhea and horrible things through the first week of Andermatt. Well, we leave. We have a few days back at home in Tahoe, Indy and I, before we head up to Alaska for the final segment. And Indy has been intermittently puking in the middle of the night this whole time. It's been kind of strange, but okay. So we're on our flight to Alaska. We're on our first leg, and we land into Seattle. And next thing I know, Indy is puking all over. Well, the way airlines are these days, I don't know if anyone's flown lately, but boy, being stuck on a tarmac because another plane is still in the jetway that you're supposed to pull into is pretty common. Well, we're stuck on the tarmac, and this is when he's vomiting everywhere. I can't get up. I can't raise my arm to get a flight attendant to try and get napkins. I can't do anything. I'm like, oh my God, oh my God. Well, then it dawned on me, I'm the full-on typical Girl Scout mom, and the bag, I have, his bag is under the seat, not in the overhead, because I wouldn't have been able to get it. I have an extra pair of clothes for him, and I have his wipes. And so I'm able to kind of wipe the puke off him and deal with it. But we're still stuck on the tarmac for another 15 minutes. There's puke everywhere, and we're just there. So thinking that maybe this is just a travel thing. Well, we get to Alaska, and it's day one. Well, the first day we arrive is just everyone's arriving, get everything set up, etc. But day one, it's already going to be blue. We have a very short window of heli skiing. It's like a 10-day week, or a 10-day trip, excuse me, not a week. And as anyone kind of knows, it's like, if it's blue, you have to go.
Right.
Well, that night, going to bed, Indy wakes up and is puking. I'm like, oh God, but I'm so used to this by now, and I'm a really light sleeper. As I put him back down, I clean him up, get everything changed, lay back down. I'm starting to be like, my stomach's starting to feel a little upset.
Ugh.
Next thing I know, I'm running to the bathroom. It's just exploding out my rear end. I am sick in some way too. So, oh my God, no way. Well, then I get back to the room, but the thing is this is starting to continually happen throughout the whole night. And I go through multiple pairs of underwear because I can't sit in the bathroom next to a toilet and lay there because I have to be in the bedroom with my kid who is also sick. And that's more important.
Right.
There's something about mom mode where you can be super sick, but you're more worried about your child. And so, yeah, I had it coming out my butt the whole night. Wake up in the morning, it is blue. I'm just I can't move. There's no way I can go out. Well, we had determined that because of the way the conditions were out in the field, we weren't going to try and go out until the evening session anyway. So I had the first half of the day, and luckily things kind of cleared up, and I'm like, I just have to sack up. This is what you do. And Indy's fine too. I sack up, we get out, we fly out into the field, and as we're standing there, the clouds come in. And it was as if there was a God that was just looking down on me, just me, because that's the way it is. So ridiculous. And yeah, didn't have to ski. Oh my God. So yeah, that's what it's like trying to film and travel with children.
All right, so we have one more question, but you don't have time.
Let's do it real fast.
Real
we can do
fast.
it real fast.
Here we go.
Okay.
So you studied abroad in Italy during college. And what I want to know is, what is one of the most scandalous things you did while you were over there?
Okay, so when I did a study abroad in Florence, Italy, I went to Monte Carlo in a Lamborghini with a married man.
Whoa.
But that all being said, that sounds really, that's a really good like headline. Wasn't quite that bad. I knew going into it that this guy, he was a typical Italian man, someone that I like had spent like hung out with in this whole friend way as a group of us, etc. And he was like, "Do you want to go to Monte Carlo in my Lamborghini?" And I was like, "Yes." And I remember talking to a few girlfriends and kind of weighing it out, but it was like I had no intention of hooking up with this guy, even though I think that was 100% his intention. It just seemed like too good of an opportunity to pass up that experience. We stayed in one of the hotels that was like literally on the water, that like the Formula One race goes directly by. And yeah, went and had like a night or two in Monte Carlo, and that was that. I mean, the guy was probably extremely disappointed, and it was kind of awkward at times. But
You got in a Lamborghini.
yeah, I got in a Lamborghini and went to Monte Carlo. So sounds a lot worse than it was. I'm sure when I look at it now, my older self is still kind of like, even though you didn't do anything, that still might have been a questionable call, but I didn't care. I was 21.
You took advantage of an opportunity, and I think that's great. That's Inappropriate Questions, and that's our podcast. And when I think about influential women in modern skiing who put their neck and careers on the line to benefit all of the rest of the women, I think of people like Sarah Burke, I think of Christy Leskinen, and I think of you. And yeah, there have been a lot of women that have done great things and have had great careers, but really you helped change big mountain skiing for all women. And it's because of the risks that you were willing to take, not on the snow, off the snow, but on the snow. You've taken more risks than almost anybody as well. And it's been crazy to see your career and how it's progressed. I thank you for standing up for what's right, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
So that was time with Elyse Saugstad. And what an uphill road she's had to climb. I mean, imagine winning an award that says on paper that you are the best at what you do. And then you apply for a job at a company that wants to showcase the best talent in that area, and they pass over you because you don't have a penis. That's what Elyse has battled for so long. And while she's finally broken through that glass ceiling, there are still women out there fighting for acceptance. Elyse's journey is bigger than just her career. She's had an impact on how all women are treated in skiing, and she's put a lot on the line to make that happen. Things men, especially the white men of skiing, like me, know nothing about. That's the podcast. At this point, I want to ask you to review the show wherever you listen. If I read your review on the podcast, you'll win something awesome. All you need to do is email me at mike@thepowellmovement with your name and address, and I'll send you something great. That's only if I read your review on the podcast. Thank you for doing that. It's greatly appreciated. It does help the show grow. What else is appreciated is having you support my incredible sponsors. They are Best Day Brewing, Stanley, Outdoor Research, Elan Skis, and Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Have a great week, everyone.